For myself, personally speaking, I kind of downplayed the initial culture shock from coming and living here in this country. Coming to Japan, I thought not that it was going to be easy, but I thought I was ready and I thought I could handle it with no problem. And I came to find that that really wasn't the case.
Welcome to the Melanated Files. In this series, we highlight and share the stories of black people from across the globe. Remember to subscribe to this channel for weekly videos and also follow us on social media for regular updates. Let's get into the interview.
My name is Brenden and I am from the United States. I am from Connecticut, Bridgeport, Connecticut to be exact. At the essence and at the root of why I'm here in Japan right now currently is my grandmother. My grandmother was born and raised in Japan. And with having that type of, connection in my grandmother and being able to kind of actually see her and actually experience some times with her when I was younger, because she was very sick, it always kind of left me wanting to know, what was her life like, what was her journey to come to this country when she was born here in Japan and her journey to go to the United States. So for me, getting that opportunity to come to Japan now as an adult is something that I wanted to really capitalize on because I had a plan actually with my mother when I was in high school to come to Japan because my mother actually wanted to go see what Japan was like when it was at the early stages of my life, but she never got the opportunity. So when I was in high school, she told me that she wanted to come, but she just told me that she didn't want to come alone. So I was like, Ma, what you mean? I'll go with you. Let's make it happen. But some financial issues kind of took place and we had to put that dream off. But I got the opportunity after traveling a little bit outside of the United States and teaching to actually kind of put an application through to Japan, and lo and behold, I'm here now. So I am a teacher. I'm an ALT. I teach and live in a prefecture called Gunma, which is about 2 hours north of Tokyo. And yeah, it's a lot different than Tokyo, but it's really cool to kind of get a different type of feel and different type of lifestyle from being in Gunma versus the lifestyle I guess someone would have living in Tokyo. My ambitions for life in Japan, to be honest, there are a lot of different things I want to accomplish with living here, being here. One of them is to actually be able to increase my level of Japanese. Right now it's pretty low, but yeah, I'm studying every day and trying to build more of that type of understanding of not only the language but the people and the culture. And lifetime goals and aspirations, I would like to eventually get to a point where I'm able to get to a level of my Japanese to have a job maybe here in Japan that is actually a Japanese company, and also kind of venture off into my own personal ambitions as far as poetry and spoken word goes. So yeah, that's pretty much the route that I would like to take. But there's a whole bunch of different dreams and aspirations floating around, but those are kind of at the top. Why did I choose the form of expression known as poetry? To be honest, it kind of started with just literally an assignment from one of my teachers. I'll never forget it. With my 7th grade teacher, he told the whole class to sit down and we was gonna write a poem. And from what I remembered about poetry at that time, being in 7th grade, it was like poetry was some boring, form of art expression that somebody just reads and sounds monotone and talks about the weather and butterflies and roses. But when I got kind of this assignment brought to me and my teacher's like telling everybody to sit down to write a poem, I'm looking at all my classmates and they're starting to write their poems, and I'm looking around like I do not want to write a poem. So I go to my teacher and I'm like, Mr. Lewis, like I don't want to write a poem. He told me that I could write whatever I want. And at that time, 7th grade, that type of creative kind of liberty was never ever given to me, just to be able to write whatever I want. So I'm looking at him like, you sure I could write whatever I want? And he's like, whatever you want. So I'm like, you sure? And he pretty much assured me that anything that I put on the paper was good enough for the poem. And I had already had like 8 bars saved up in a pocket because I was like a big lover of hip hop. Hip hop was like one of my first loves. So I put a couple of some hip hop bars in this poem and then added some at the beginning and end. And then literally I was the last one to start this poem, but I was the first one to finish because I had already had some bars tucked away. and I was the first one to give it to him, and I was like, ready to like, be so proud of my poem. But then he told me he's publishing it in a book, and I literally wish I would have had spent more time taking my time to edit and proofread and realize what I was trying to put into this poem, because it actually ended up being published in a book of poems with a collective of my classmates and other people in the school. So after that point in my life, for getting that freedom to be creative in any type of way that I wanted to, that's kind of like what led me to stick with that type of expression and that creativity, and yeah, that's what led me to be so involved with poetry now. What do I like the most about Japan? That's a tough one, because I feel like a lot of the things that I appreciate and I enjoy about Japan are like double-edged swords in a way. Like for example, I'm a teacher, so a big part of my experience right now is education. So education and the value placed on education here is something that I look at and I, in a lot of ways, admire. And I say that because being able to teach in different countries, I was teaching in South America, I've taught in the US as well. In the US, I would have to bark at students to get their work done, or when I was in South America, I would have to beg students to like, kind of want to learn English. But here in Japan, if I tell students to like, do an assignment or start writing, I don't hear no complaints, I don't hear no arguments, I literally just hear pencils moving. And that's something that is like, wow, that's really something that I feel like is across the board here in this country. And the reason why I say it's a double-edged sword is because I feel like there's sometimes a little bit too much pressure for education, and I think a lot of people as well have been able to recognize this in their experiences in Japan. And I feel like sometimes that pressure or that expectation that people put on education is sometimes detrimental to people's emotional and mental states. So I really appreciate the emphasis put on education, but sometimes I do understand why it could be a little bit overboard. Other than that, what else do I like about Japan? I do like the culture. It is a lot to adjust to. And I think with one thing and one piece of the culture that I really appreciate is the consideration. People here in Japan are very considerate. That saying like "don't disturb the wild" is literally practiced in so many different facets and aspects of the culture, and you see it. Even if you never knew anything about the Japanese culture and you came here just fresh slate, nobody told you anything, you would literally be able to notice the difference between different cultures in here in Japan in terms of how considerate people are of others. So I really appreciate that aspect as well. Also the food is crazy. Food is everything that I've tried so far, except for natto, is phenomenal. I have so many. I mean, I guess, it's so easy to say ramen. Ramen is one of my big favorites, but I also like yakisoba. I don't know what it is about that sauce and the yakisoba, but it's kind of like noodles, and you cook it and fry it and or grill it, I guess, but it's so good, so delicious. What do I like the most about Gunma? It's hard not to mention Gunma and not mention onsens. The onsen culture in Gunma is top notch, and at first, I guess if you are a complete stranger of the culture in Japan, then maybe the idea of going into onsen and being naked with a whole bunch of people is a little, it can put you off a little bit. But for myself, I don't want to like make it sound crazy, but I'm kind of used to just being naked in a room full of men anyway. I played college football, so that was kind of like, it wasn't really a big deal. So just coming here and being able to experience the onsen culture and like be able to relax and not really care about, I ain't gonna lie, a lot of people do look at me like if I don't have any clothes on. I'm sorry, a lot of people look at me if I do have clothes on. So when I don't have clothes on, a lot of people tend to like, kind of stare at me. But once I was able to get over that part, I was really able to enjoy the onsen culture, and that's one of my favorite things that I enjoy about Gunma. For myself, personally speaking, I kind of downplayed the initial culture shock from coming and living here in this country. And one of the reasons why I kind of downplayed it is not even because I thought it wasn't going to be anything. I knew coming here and living here was definitely going to provide like a very, very significant amount of culture shock. But in my mind, I kind of have already adapted to so many different lifestyles in different places, both in the United States and living in different areas in the United States, and also getting the chance to step outside of the United States and live and learn a different language. So coming to Japan, I thought not that it was going to be easy, but I thought I was ready and I thought I could handle it with no problem. And I came to find that that really wasn't the case, and also found myself in like a state of depression. And the reason why I say that is because I wasn't really acknowledging where I was. One of the things that kind of hit me off guard was the fact that something had taken place at home, and one of the people that I love was in a life or death situation. And receiving a phone call and hearing the news that, you know, someone of that, you know, is really close to me, and not being able to get the full story because it was still ongoing and it was still taking place after I received the phone call, it really put me in a place where it was like I was helpless. Because being here in Japan and not only just living in this environment that's so safe, I felt like here is my brother, you know, going through this particular situation, and I can't do anything about it to, you know, help or to give comfort or to, you know, make him be at ease. And that really got to me. But going through that, I realized that I wasn't really so quick to share that information with anybody out here, because I didn't know how to, and I didn't want people to kind of take a certain stance or perception about me or about where I'm from. And I realized that I was kind of walking around and not sharing this information and not opening up and not letting anybody in to talk to me about it. And I kind of took its toll, like emotionally, for me. And in this process, I also found myself not even speaking to nobody at work. And it wasn't even just a language barrier. You know, I can kind of communicate a little bit in Japanese, but I found myself just being so quiet and not speaking with anyone at all in my place of work. And this is all three of my high schools. And I would go home and I would just, you know, kind of be sitting in solitude. And I think that was something that really caught me off guard, with being not speaking to anyone, being in solitude, being in a position where I felt like I couldn't help my brother. And I actually had suffered an injury. I dislocated my collarbone while I was snowboarding. And I literally, at this particular place in time, felt my body going through changes because I couldn't move. And I actually had to have people help me do so many different things that I thought I could do by myself. But once this particular injury took place, I lost my independence like that. So these different things taking place all in the same moment, all in the same time, like literally getting injured, not being able to move, my brother, you know, my brother going through the particular situation and not knowing what was going on in that situation, and also not being able to speak with anyone about it and open up to anyone about it, it really put me in a place that I wasn't familiar with, because there was another wave of culture shock that was coming with being and living here in Japan. And all of these different things forced me to sit down and acknowledge the fact that I was where I was. And I feel like if someone is going to come to Japan, they definitely need to be ready emotionally to kind of go through their own battles and kind of figure things out for themselves. Not to say that there won't be people there for you, but I found that even though people really want to help you, even though people are friendly, even though people are kind, sometimes the things that you experience and the things that you go through, they don't have the answers for you, and you kind of got to figure it out for yourself. And that was something that I found myself having to do, being in that particular situation and being, you know, at such a low point. And definitely the culture shock was one of the waves that made everything come crashing down. I am happy to say I'm in a much better place now, but it was something that I was really forced to sit down and acknowledge and recognize in order to kind of climb out that low spot. And I think that kind of fits into a lot of things that people go through, where they might be feeling sad, or they might be feeling lonely, or they might be feeling certain things going or living here in this culture, and they don't want to acknowledge it. For myself, I wasn't acknowledging it. I was kind of trying to, you know, oh, you just a little sad because you miss home, or you just a little sad because you miss your brother, or you just a little sad because you don't know what's going on, or you just a little sad because you're not talking to anyone. But it was so many different things that were taking place that made me have to sit down and acknowledge the fact, like, hey, like, you got to take this slow, and you got to start going in this direction instead of continuing to sink and continuing to close yourself off to the people that are around you. So yeah, that's definitely something that I would say was a very, very big eye-opener living right here in Japan. What did I do to kind of get up out of that state? I know this is probably cliche, but I think definitely just acknowledging it first. and actually coming to terms with like, yo, you are feeling this way. And if you don't acknowledge it, and if you keep pretending that you're fine and smiling in people's faces and like nothing's going on, it's almost as if you're gonna continue to sink lower. And I think one of the things that I had to do first was acknowledge it. Second, I think one way that I was able to get out of this particular state is changing the way that I think and disciplining myself to not allow myself to just continue to do the same things. And I say that because I feel like I did rehab with my shoulder, and I'm still doing rehab, and it's still not completely fine. Like I still have times where I'm like, oh, I gotta chill out. But I love sports, and I wanted to get back to playing sports. I wanted to get back to being able to move my body. And I think the same way that you do rehab with a particular muscle or part of your body that you're trying to get better is the same way that you have to take the time to be disciplined and rehab either your emotional state or your mental state. I think it's like something that is a process that step by step you have to get from wherever you are to step by step to get to where you want to be. One of the ways that I was able to kind of climb out of that place is, like I said, acknowledging the fact that I was there, but also rehabbing my emotional state and my mental state the same way that I was rehabbing my shoulder. And that came with me not allowing myself to just lock myself in my room after I finish work and just watch a Netflix series. It came with trying to put myself out there and actually communicate with other people. It came with accepting an invitation that I would receive from someone else to go somewhere or to do something, and to actually open up to other people around me and let them know, like, yo, I was going through this, or I am going through this. And even if there were some people that were in this culture here in Japan that couldn't understand, just being able to confess and open up and to reveal how you are feeling to them allows you to be in a place where you're able to start getting over whatever it is that you're going through, whether it be emotional, whether it be spiritual, whether it be, physical. And I think that was one of the ways for me to actually open up and to start speaking about it and addressing it and reveal to people around me that are, I'm interacting with on a daily basis, like, wow, okay, you were going through this, or you're going through this. And even if they can't help you right away, just having someone there to listen to you and being able to speak to you about it is one of the ways that you are able, where I was able to kind of overcome being in that particular place. One thing that I would say I don't really like about Japan is it seems that a lot of people lack the ability to improvise, or it seems like a lot of people lack the ability to kind of go off of the script. And what I mean is, like, for example, I went to a restaurant and I was asking for, and it was tough for me to ask because my Japanese is not so great, but I was asking for, a particular dish, but I wanted something taken off of that dish and something else added. And the person is looking at me like, nah, we don't do that. And for myself, I'm like, oh, maybe I didn't say it right. So let me try my best to, like, not even try to insult the guy, but try to explain, like, I'm allergic to this, like, article of food, and I'm allergic to this food, but I would like this placed on it. I don't mind paying extra. I don't mind, like, being charged, whatever. And it was literally like, there was no way possible for them to remove, like, the top of this particular dish and place something else on it. And I found this in so many different other aspects of Japan, where people are not really able to kind of go against the grain, or even just improvise, or kind of like break off from the expected way things are supposed to be. And sometimes that gets frustrating because it's like, there'll be an issue and you can see the problem and it's clear as day, but then for people here that, have been used to doing something for so long a certain way, for them is like, nah, we're gonna continue to do it this way. So I would say that's one of the things that I don't like about Japan. Other than that, it would just be, sometimes I feel like people don't really express how they really, really feel. And I've noticed that with speaking to both men and women, they will say something that really is not how they genuinely feel or what they really think. But they kind of like keep on this facade to try to please the person that they are speaking to, or they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So I would say that's one of the things that, can also be very frustrating. My Black experience here in Japan, I've found that a lot of people, which is another thing that I appreciate about the people here in this country, they seem to be very open to culture that is not Japanese, and also people. Sometimes you might have some people like stare and kind of have like a little cold shoulder, but other than that, I feel like a lot of people are willing to accept and to explore and try to get to know about, you know, somebody else from a different culture. And I really haven't had any issues when it comes to, you know, race or people kind of talking to me or looking at me in a way that's kind of like, you know, prejudice. I will say there was a couple of situations where I could kind of tell that people, like for example, I was walking somewhere and I was standing behind someone, and then, you know, they kind of just happened to turn around and they see me, and then, like, you know, they kind of jump back. It was a little shocking because sometimes a lot of people in Japan are really jumpy, like, you know, and it confuses me because it's like one of the safest places on the face of the earth, and people are so kind of spooked easily. So there might be a couple of people that, you know, might be somewhat scared or somewhat, you know, put off to the idea of someone else being in their territory that doesn't look like them. But that's very, very few and far between as far as my experience being here in Japan. The general attitude towards black people here in Japan, from my experience, is pretty positive. And the reason why I say that is because, again, I have never felt like people here look at me with anger in their eyes or like disgust. I have been in a lot of different places where people do have that type of, you know, I guess, hatred in their eyes based off the color of my skin. Being in Europe or being in South America or being, you know, in the United States, that's where I was born and raised, I have felt and I have seen and I have witnessed and I have experienced people being, you know, very, very prejudiced, very, very racist. And I have never experienced that so far. And I haven't been in Japan for a long time, but I have never experienced someone openly or blatantly just, you know, talking down to me because I am different. So I think the general census or the general feeling towards black people here in Japan is one of, you know, curiosity, accepting, and, you know, overall, just, you know, you're a regular human being like me. To be honest, I teach at 3 different high schools. So I'm able to, and actually one of my main high school, I teach at 3 different high schools, and one of my main schools is an all-girls school. So for me, that has been a very big adjustment. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of the, I guess, preconceived notions of me being a male, African-American male, and working in an all-girls school is really things that I brought with me versus things that really come with the territory. And what I mean is, I kind of have taken a long time to warm up or kind of speak to a lot of my students. And a reason for that is because I guess in the United States, there has been, you know, and I've even been in schools where there have been certain situations between students and teachers. And I kind of walk with that on my shoulder, where it's like, I don't want anyone to say anything about me because, you know, I'm in an all-girls school, and a lot of the students in my school, like, you know, they tell me that they love me, or they tell me I'm so cute, or they tell me I have crushes on me. So I never want to put the idea into anyone's mind that, you know, they have to worry about me ever, you know, crossing a line in that type of magnitude. But what I've realized is that a lot of people in Japan don't even think like that. And I guess a lot of people would say that they're like kind of, not naive, but like, it's like a word in Japanese that I can't remember at the time, but it's like almost like they're sweet or like innocent. And for example, one of the times there was a student that I worked with, her and her friend used to ask me for like kind of like lessons and just kind of having conversations with English after, you know, their classes were done. And I was free, so I definitely was willing to help and kind of help them, you know, speak, study, practice English. And there was one time where I seen one of these students on the train, and, you know, she was so happy. She's like, oh my goodness. And she was in her school uniform, and she came up to talk to me. And I was like, kind of like, you know, like, hold up, you know, like, there's other people around and you got a school uniform on, and I didn't have, like, you know, my usual uniform, well, not uniform, but she came to talk to me, and I didn't have my usual kind of like, you know, teacher gear on. I had like some just regular, you know, regular outfit on, and she was so happy to talk to me, but I was kind of hesitant because I had this idea in my mind that if people seen me talking to a grown man talking to a student in a uniform, that they would look at me, or they would like kind of be worried or concerned about what was taking place. And I kind of try to explain that to her, like when she was like, why we can't talk right now in English. And I try to explain to her, but also ask her, like, is it okay if we're having this conversation and, you know, like we're not in school or anything? And she's like nah, it's fine. Like, people don't look at this situation in that way. More so, they think I'm cool. So I was like, oh, okay. Like, I had to kind of take that type of taboo, or that idea of that being like completely inappropriate or not something that should happen at all, and kind of like try to adapt and learn that, of course, there are certain lines, but I don't have to sit there and limit myself or limit my interactions with my students just because I have that fear of people looking at it in the wrong way. So that was something that, you know, took a while to get to, but I'm still kind of in that process as well. But it's something that has been a very, very big, you know, part of my experience. So one of the main differences between the United States and Japan, I feel like, is the safety. In the United States, and where I'm from, is not the safest place. And I realized, being here in Japan, I've literally let my guard down in so many ways. And what really kind of made me like snap out of it and realize that I had let my guard down so much is when I finally had the chance to step outside of Japan since being here, and I went to the Philippines. And the place that I went to, the Philippines, is not really the tourist spots. It wasn't really like for a tourist kind of mission. It was something completely different. It wasn't tourist purpose. And when I got off the plane and I'm walking through the city, I literally felt how relaxed I had been living here in Japan, in terms of like being able to spot, like, you know, certain danger, or look around and see different threats. And the reason why I say that is because I've been in a lot of different countries where, you know, you gotta kind of keep your guard up, and I've actually been robbed in other countries. So being in Japan and not using this muscle, and not literally having to walk around and like keep, you know, like my head on a swivel, has literally made me drop my guard in so many different ways. And I think that is one of the biggest differences between my country and Japan. In my country, you kind of, where I'm from specifically, if you walk around with that much of a, you know, in my country, in Japan, I feel like that is one of the biggest differences. If you are here in Japan, you will notice that you are in an environment where you don't have to put your guard up all the time. And versus the United States, it's not like you got to be on constant edge, but there are certain areas and places that you would go to where you know it's time to, like, you know, keep your head on a swivel, and it's time to pay closer attention to your surroundings and everything around you. And I think there are not many places like that here in Japan where you need to be on edge or you need to be alert. And I would say that's one of the biggest differences between my country and Japan. The time that I got robbed, I actually didn't have, you know, my belongings robbed. I was actually with a friend, and me and her, we had just met because we were in the same English program. And we were in Chile, and we were actually getting ready to take a trip from Santiago to Valparaiso. And Valparaiso was like a place where I lived, and it's such a beautiful city, and I was so excited to go. But during this particular morning, there was a riot taking place, which is, I feel like, another drastic difference between, you know, education systems. But there was a riot taking place in the city of Santiago, and one of the train stations was blocked and closed off. So me and my friend, we were trying to go to this particular train station, but because it was blocked, we had to go to the next one. While we're walking, this is a common trick. So if you're in South America, Chile, Argentina, anywhere, Colombia, watch out for this one. We're walking, and I have my bag with me, and then the sweetest old lady, you know, she comes up to me and she's like, hey, like, I'm saying she, permiso, permiso. Like, she got a little napkin and she's like trying to wipe something off of me, and I'm like, you know, what you doing? And I see, and I look at my bag, there's a whole bunch of black stuff on my bag. So I'm like, you know, I stop, and I'm like, hold up, like, what is this coming from? And as I'm wiping off the little amount that I see, all of a sudden some more appears on a different side. And my friend, she had her big backpack, and she also had like a little, you know, small book bag. And I actually told her, like, let me hold your small book bag just so, you know, there's no issues. And she's like, no, I got it, I'm a woman, I could, you know, I could carry my own weight. I'm like, cool. but they had put the same stuff on her bag. So mind you, the lady was sweet and she's helping us wipe it off, and my friend is wiping stuff off her big bag, I'm wiping stuff off my bag, and I guess my friend had gave the book bag, which is something you shouldn't do, gave the book bag to the lady, and the lady's wiping the stuff off her small book bag. So the lady gives us more napkins, and more black stuff appears all of a sudden. We get it all off, and she walks away. She's like, oh, okay, you good? And I'm looking at my friend like, are you good? And she's like, yes. Where's my black bag? And yes, we had gotten robbed. It wasn't any of my belongings, but I still kind of felt personally responsible because I really wasn't, on my P's and Q's like that. And it was something that, was definitely an experience that I learned from. If I could change one thing about the world, it would be how people receive information. The reason why I say that is because I feel like there's a lot of positive and loving and caring things that take place in the world, but we have literally allowed ourselves to really focus on some of the things that are that have shock value or clickbait, and that just kind of is like a perpetual cycle to make more things of that type of essence or negative or type of bad type of vibe be put out there. And I would definitely try to just change the way people kind of accept information and receive information, in the sense of taking in things that are positive and sharing things that are positive and showing love, because I feel like a lot of people, they don't even know how to show love nowadays. They kind of just show love by just double tapping or writing a little post, but actually supporting somebody else or actually giving their time or their energy or even their money to something that is positive or something that is put in the universe to help other people is not really portrayed or received in the best way. So I would definitely try to change the way people kind of take in the information that's given to them. One person, dead or alive, that I would like to have dinner with, and why? I'm gonna go with August Wilson. I was literally just thinking about him today when I was in a cafe writing, and the reason why is because I feel like August Wilson was a writer that was ahead of his time, and I also feel like I could learn so many different things from him as a writer. And as a writer myself, I feel like he has so many different tips and tricks to, kind of make the best work come to life. And also he's one of the authors that has literally made me laugh out loud, hysterically, from reading one of his plays and just kind of really sitting down and immersing myself in some of his plays. I've also realized that he was able to capture some really, really very important human traits and aspects in his plays that are not so easy to kind of portray. So I would definitely say August Wilson. One of my proudest accomplishments is actually being able to travel to different countries and being able to perform poetry and make people laugh, cry, and kind of tell me how much they can relate to the material and to the words that I kind of put on performance. So that's one of the proudest things that I've experienced and feel really, really good about. One of the biggest lessons I've learned in life is to follow your heart. I remember my boy Santi told me in college, follow your #1 GPS. And I can honestly say that since hearing that and actually putting that into practice, it has never steered me wrong. It may have put me in some, tough situations or some relationships that I didn't really, walk away from unharmed, but I would definitely say that it has never put me in a place where I didn't belong. So that's the best life advice that I've got. I would say one of my earliest memories actually involves my grandmother. I remember we would go see her and visit her in the hospital. And my grandmother, as I was saying, was born and raised in Japan. And when she did come to the country, she had, a whole bunch of kids with my grandfather. And she was also sick toward the later years of her life. And I remember going to visit her, and I was always excited because, for one, I didn't get to see my grandmother a lot. But for two, she always used to give my brothers and sister and I Swedish fish. So for me, that was like, something that I associate with my grandmother. Anytime I see Swedish fish or eat Swedish fish, and I kind of think of her and everything that we were able to kind of share together. If the world was listening right now and I had one message, 15 seconds, I would tell them to seek balance and spread love. One thing I think Japan does really well that the world can learn from is being considerate to your neighbor, being considerate to the environment that you're in, being considerate to living things, being considerate to humans, being considerate to the ocean. I feel like even something as simple as a small phrase, itadakimasu, in Japanese, which is something that is, from what I've learned, is thank you for the meal, but the deeper meaning or the deeper message that I've kind of learned from someone as well is that it also means that you're giving thanks to everything that went into creating every single portion on your plate or your bowl or whatever it is that you're eating off of. And when I heard that, itadakimasu, like, it's like, wow, like, you know, I grew up saying grace as a kid, and sometimes I used to like race through my grace just to get to my meal. But now it's like, I feel like I got a cheat code with itadakimasu because it's literally giving thanks to whoever you believe in and everything that went in to making that meal. And I guess I would say the Japanese culture is so considerate in that aspect, and I think the world can learn in terms of how considerate the Japanese people are to the people that are around them and to the lifestyle that, you know, that they live. It's very, very humbling in a lot of ways, being able to experience it living here in Japan firsthand. I would say a must visit is the mountains in Japan. I'm not even gonna lie. I've been low-key suffering living in Gunma with no beach. Where I'm from, I have a beach not too far from where I live in the United States, and it's really been tugging at me to get to the beach. But because I don't really have so much access to a beach, I've been kind of taking up trips to the mountains and trying out some snowboarding, and just being up there and being able to see so many different parts of Japan just from one particular point of view is really, really dope. So I would definitely suggest, if you come to Japan, definitely get up in the mountains and see it for yourself. I think a common misconception about Japan is that people feel like Japan is so immersed and so technologically advanced and superior than everywhere else in the world. I will say that Tokyo is definitely leading the game in a lot of different aspects in terms of technology and, you know, that type of innovation, technology. Tokyo, Japan is definitely, you know, leading the charge. But in other parts of Japan, you kind of notice that, oh, this is not so technologically advanced. While it is developed, you definitely can see the clear differences in a lot of different countries, at least the countries that I've been to, how developed Japan is. But my perspective has definitely changed with coming to Japan and living in a place outside of Tokyo. Because while Tokyo, like I said, is kind of leading the charge in that innovation and technology advances, there's so many other places that in Japan are just, you know, nice and chill, not so much technology going on, pretty humble, low-key. And it changed my perspective of Japan in terms of every other place is either like, you know, a temple or some crazy technology. One of the things that I feel like is the biggest differences between dating in the United States and in Japan is that people don't really always give you the true answer to what they're feeling. And a lot of times they beat around the bush. From my one experience dating a Japanese girl who was actually also half black, I don't know if that matters. I thought it mattered. But it was very interesting to try to get to the bottom of certain things that she was feeling or certain things that she wanted. And I realized that she would give me an answer sometimes to a question that I would ask about how she feels or about what she thinks about a certain thing. And I started to notice the deeper that I started to dig, I started to notice that she was kind of giving me an answer just to kind of like make me happy or to not really be confrontational. And it wasn't even so much of something that was a big deal. It could be just something that we disagreed upon, but she would say something like, oh, okay, yeah, I see it like that. But it's like, no, you don't, because, you know, you told me before that you don't really look at it that way. But you could kind of see that she was trying to make the situation kind of simmer down, even if it wasn't so, you know, hostile. But I would also say one of the biggest differences between dating here in Japan and the United States is that a lot of people just hit ghost. Like, I've made maybe a couple of attempts to try to pursue women, and like, hey, you know, like I'm interested after meeting them, or trying to, you know, communicate with them after that initial meeting, and it's like they're like, oh, okay, yeah, like, and then they just stop, you know, yeah, we can meet up, or yeah, we can try to figure something out. But then it's like 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by, and they're just like completely ghost. I would also say another difference is that people here in Japan literally try to schedule a meeting or like a night going out, or even a date, like 3 months in advance. For example, like I have a friend and he's like, oh, you know, we should hang out sometime. And I'm like, all right, man, we're like, what are you doing next week? And he's like, oh, next week I'm busy. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like 2 weeks, what are you doing 2 weeks? He's like, oh, no, I'm not gonna be able to hang out. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe we could figure out something this month. And he's like, nah, I'm not gonna be busy till 3 months from now. Or he said, I'm not gonna be free till 3 months from now. And it's like, 3 months from now. And I've actually experienced the same thing with women. Like there have been a couple of girls that I tried to like set something up with, and they're like, oh, you know, I can't see you this month, but in 2 months I'll be free. 2 months, that's like, you know, I might even forget your name in 2 months. Like, no disrespect, but it's like, you know, I was trying to make, you know, to see if this was to be something pursuing, but I guess the time frame of how people expect to date or communicate or see each other here in Japan is a little bit different in the United States. The hair, so thankfully, it was actually the girl that I dated. The girl that I was dating, she actually put me onto a beauty salon in a city that's not too far from mine. It was actually the city that she was living in. And I was so happy because the lady that I go to is really good. And also, the only person that I found in Japan, in my area that I live in, that can braid. So I was very, very blessed and very, very thankful because I feel like the first 3 months that I was here, it was a little bit of a struggle to like, you know, keep doing the same thing with my hair every single day. But yeah, thankfully finding that person definitely made things easier. If there's one thing that I would say needs more attention in Japan, I think it would be the amount of people that are actually unhappy and depressed and, you know, suicidal. And I know this is probably a sensitive topic, and maybe I have no, you know, business treading these type of waters, but just trying to communicate and be friends with people, I've seen and I've heard some things. I remember one time I was like texting a girl, not even to be romantic, but just like trying to learn Japanese and trying to, you know, be friends with someone. And she was texting me back like, you know, I've given up on life and I'm ready to kill myself. And I'm like, oh, hold up, you know, let me call you real fast. Let's talk about it. I don't know if she was doing that just to get my attention, but I would doubt that, and I would give her the benefit of the doubt. And even just being able to chance to speak with her and, you know, kind of get insights of what she's feeling and what she's going through, I noticed there was a similar pattern to 2 other people that I was talking to. And it was like, wow, like, you know, one of my friends, he was telling me of the things that he goes through and the ways that he feels being here. And I think it definitely relates to the amount of emphasis put on the work culture here in Japan. And I think that is something that definitely, even if there is a little bit of light or, you know, a significant amount of attention put on or placed on it, I think there's never, I guess in regards when it comes to life or death or how people are feeling and how people are living their lives, I don't think too much attention can be placed on it. And I think it's definitely something that is worth talking about or addressing or trying to find ways to make amends to people feeling that type of pressure or feeling that type of weight on their shoulders 24/7. People can find me online on YouTube and on Instagram. My Instagram is balance with a 3, and that is the same for my YouTube channel. I just started a YouTube channel living here in Japan, and I'm trying to actually get more videos and more content put up, and definitely trying to share more of my story of coming here in Japan. So you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, balance with a 3. I think I'm falling in love with life again, finding reasons to want to write again, pouring paint on pages instead of popping that Vicodin. Was going through some stages, but now I'm walking upright again, fighting the good fight while climbing the depths inside of Brenden. And this time around, I'm in a whole new city. Feel like my pen and pad the only damn thing I brought with me, cause even with all these clothes, I'm still feeling exposed. Take my shame and salvation and lacing them into poems, embracing some of my wrongs I was once too embarrassed to write down. learning to put away my phone and live in the moment right now.
Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to share your story or have us visit your region, send us a message on any of our social media platforms or via our website.
That's good.